Hey everyone, my name is Sean, and in today's video I'm going to be giving you a list of the best hand traps to play in Yu-Gi-Oh! Legacy of the Duelist Link Evolution. Now, this list is considering primarily the online ranked version of Link Evolution, which means we are playing 1v1 single duels with no side decks whatsoever. Because we are considering that format primarily, I'm mostly going for cards which are as reliable to play as possible within your strategy, because you cannot necessarily predict what your opponent's going to play, and you cannot always necessarily predict whether you're going to be able to go first or second, because there's a lot of variance in what people choose to play online in the online ranked format of this game. So with that kept in mind, let's go on to number 10. At number 10 on our list, I want to talk about archetype based hand traps. Certain archetype strategies which are popular in Legacy of the Duelist Link Evolution have hand traps which are specific for their strategies. Things like Autogeist with Autogeist Konkiri, Heroes with Elemental Hero Honest Neos, Prohibit Snake for Cyber strategies, Subterra Fiendess for Subterras, and even things like Harpies have their own hand trap with Harpies Feather Storm. Now, these hand traps are very, very powerful effects. They are very, they impact the game quite significantly, and so whenever you're playing against these strategies, you should always be thinking, does my opponent have one of these cards in their hand? But the benefit of these hand traps more so is that they are generally cards which are easy to search out from the deck and add to the hand. And so they often become a core part of these certain strategies, and so you should always be thinking of how you can counter these hand traps when you're playing against them. So I'm not going to go through these cards specifically because that will take too long, but yes, certain archetypes have their own unique hand traps specific for their strategies. And number 9 on our list I want to talk about is DD Crow. Now, in case you are not aware of this, the graveyard is just a pool of resources for you to use. In modern style Yu-Gi-Oh! The graveyard isn't just a pile of cards which you've used and are thrown away. They are there as a resource to use. Whether you bring back monsters from the graveyard, whether you banishing cards in the graveyard to get out of a beneficial effects, or whether you're just using your graveyard to count certain resources so you can draw more cards, such as in Sky Strikers. The graveyard is always important, and so being able to interact with your opponent's graveyard is also important as well. And one of the most versatile cards to do this is DD Crow. DD Crow is really good because it doesn't have a trigger based effect requirement. You could just activate this card whenever you want to, and you just discard this card, target a card in their graveyard, and banish that card. Why I also like DD Crow is that it doesn't specify what card you have to target. It doesn't say it only works against monster effects. You can use this against bells, traps, and so it works in a variety of different strategies by being very, very versatile. Now, before we move on from DD Crow and why DD Crow is so good, I do want to mention cards like Ghost Spell and Haunted Mansion and Skullmeister, which are also anti-graveyard based hand traps. Now, these cards aren't necessarily as good because they do have trigger based requirements. However, I do want to just mention that Ghost Spell can be a good consideration right now, because a popular anti-hand trap card is Called by the Grave, and Ghost Spell can negate that kind of card, so she can be quite good as almost a backup card to your opponent trying to use Called by the Grave. Also, she also negates things like Monster Reborn as well, so Ghost Spell is pretty good, but I still think DD Crow is better, and so that comes in at number 9. At number 8 we have Artifact Lancia and Drawn Bird. I couldn't decide between these two cards. I think they both serve a very, very similar purpose in that they want to lock your opponent out from doing a specific action for a turn. Artifact Lancia makes it so neither player can banish cards for the rest of the turn, whereas Drawn Bird makes it so that neither player can add cards from either player's main deck to the hand for the rest of the turn. Now, these are very powerful cards because they can lock your opponent out of their engine. As I said earlier, the graveyard can be an engine of resources, and often people like to banish cards from the graveyard as part of their engine in order to generate advantage and gain resources. Similarly, getting cards from the deck to the hand is obviously definitely an engine requirement for many decks, and not while every deck tries to do that or can do that. A lot of powerful strategies want to draw multiple cards or want to add certain cards from their deck to the hand. Things like Mech Knights, Orcust, Spirals, Synchro Spam with TG Hyper Librarian. There are so many strategies where these cards can just absolutely cripple them and say you have to stop your turn now because you can't do what you want to do and access your key cards. The only problem with these cards and why they're so far down the list is because they can be quite specific. If you put these cards in your main deck, you're going to find that you're playing against strategies where these cards are just no good of being of use at all. For example, playing Draw a Lot Burn against, say, a Burning Abyss strategy is pointless because they're a graveyard-based strategy primarily. Playing Lancia against something like Mech Knights, not Mech Knights, but let's say a Synchro Spam isn't really that good either because they don't have any cards they want to banish, they just want to keep us summoning cards to the field. So yeah, these cards can often be dead sometimes, but they are also very, very powerful. At number 7 on our list, a card which I think is very, very underrated that I kind of wanted to mention is Dimension Shifter. Dimension Shifter has a very high activation requirement, and that is you must have no cards in your graveyard to use this card. However, once you've used this card, it says, until the end of the next turn, any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. This is a hand trap that works a lot like Dimensional Fissure, Macro Cosmos, Masked Hero Dark Claw, and even Herald of the Arclight. And anytime you can force your opponent to have their graveyard cards banished rather than actually sent to the graveyard can cripple so many strategies. This card is almost like an auto win button against certain deck strategies because they can't afford for their cards to go to the banish pile. Strategies like Sky Striker, Salamangreats, Orcust, Spirals, Synchro Spam, Mech Knights not so much, Altergeist, Subterrors not so much, but Altergeist definitely. There are so many decks which just have activation requirements where they want their cards to go to the graveyard, and Dimension Shifter says no, you can't do that. So if you're playing a strategy such as Grand Marjus or Thunder Dragons, you can incorporate this card as a hand trap as almost an auto win button, so as soon as you draw it, play it, and then you're like, okay cool, I win because you can't do what you want to do. I do also want to mention that Dimension Shifter is also good against cards where the activation requirement requires you to send a card to the graveyard. So if it says in the activation part of the card, such as Magician's Soul, says you can send up to 2 spells or trap cards from your hand and or field to the graveyard, or you can send 1 level 6 or higher spellcaster monster from your deck to the graveyard, you can't use these cards at all while Dimension Shifter is activated. And so this card can be very, very powerful in general. At number 6 on our list, we have Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit used to be one of the most popular hand traps played in the game. Her effect is when a monster on the field activates its effect, or when a spell or trap card is already on the face of the field and activates its effect, you can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard, destroy that card on the field. And this card used to be very, very good against strategies such as Pendulums, or field deck strategies such as Dracos. This card, any strategy which relies on having cards face up in the field in order to then trigger their effects, this card can be really, really good to use against. However, the game has kind of moved on from those types of strategies, where now we kind of more want hand traps that negate our opponent's cards rather than just destroy their opponent's cards. For example, imagine playing, let's say, Fire Formation Tenki, which says you can add a Beast Warrior card from your deck to your hand. It would be better to just negate the effect overall rather than just to destroy the card. So Ghost Ogre Snow Rabbit isn't as popular as it used to be. However, I feel like it's starting to see a resurgence in popularity thanks to the use of Crystal Hauki Firebacks. Crystal Hauki Firebacks is a link monster that requires you to use a tuner monster to summon it out, and that can also summon other tuners from your deck that are level 3 or lower. And Ghost Ogre fits both of those bills. She is a level 3 or lower tuner monster, so she can be used to make Crystal Hauki Firebacks, but also be summoned from Crystal Hauki Firebacks, and her effect also works while she's on the field as well. Coupled with the card Emergency Teleport, which can summon her from your hand or deck to the field, she can be a very versatile card to use. So while you might not get the benefit of using Ghost Ogre Snow Rabbit as part of for her effect against certain strategies, she can then just be used to make Needle Fiber, so she's kind of versatile in that sense. Not necessarily the best hand trap in the game, but definitely worth considering if you're ever playing this card as well. Okay, the next group of cards on our list are the Sideframe Gear cards. We have Sideframe Gear Gamma, Epsilon, and Delta. The main card for this package is Sideframe Gear Gamma, and that's what the main card you'll see people talking about, but I thought I'll mention the other cards here as well, where Sideframe Gear Gamma says when your opponent activates a monster effect, while you control no monsters, you can special summon both this card from your hand and one Sideframe Driver from your hand, deck, or graveyard to the field, and then negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that monster. Now, the Epsilon and Delta also work similar, where Delta works for spell cards, and Epsilon works for trap cards. And I feel like there are some decent spell cards to negate in this game as well as monster effects, such as Lightning Storm. This card can be very good to use against. Now, Sideframe Gears have a very high activation requirement in that you must have no monsters on the field in order to use these cards. However, it is now possible to bypass that effect if you are able to make the card Sideframe Lord Lambda. This card requires any 2 monsters except tokens to make, and while this card is on the field, you can activate the effects of Sideframe Gear monsters in your hand even while you control a monster. So this allows you to build your board almost play as you normally would, and then still have these cards in your hand as counter hand traps for your opponent's strategy. Now, where Sideframe Lambda really becomes really special is her effect also allows you to search out your Sideframe Gear cards as well, if you are able to banish a psychic monster from your field. So, if you are playing something such as a rank 4 box and you can summon Time Thief Redoer, or you're playing Mech Knights and have Purple Nightfall and you can make Lambda to the board, you can then use these effects to banish themselves from your field and then bring them back later on in order to trigger Lambda's effect, and that way you can search out a monster effect negate or a spell negate on demand. So it can be a very, very powerful package to use. It's often used mostly when you're trying to go second and go second strategies, but strategies such as Lunar Lights love to abuse Sideframe Lord Lambda because it gives you a very, very powerful hand trap. And so at number 5 we have the Sideframe Gear package. And number 4 on our list is Effect Failure. Effect Failure has become one of my favourite hand traps in the game currently because of its synergy with cards like Christian Hanky Firebacks. But first of all, what does this card do on its own? Effect Failure says during your opponent's main phase, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, then target one effect monster your opponent controls, negate the effects of that face-up monster your opponent controls until the end of the turn. Effect Failure is a very versatile card. Almost every single deck plays effect monsters into it of some type, and so Effect Failure can be used against a variety of cards. Now, while Effect Failure has become a lot more popular recently, is just like Ghost Ogre Snow Rabbit, is its ability to work with Christian Hanky Firebacks because of how good this card is. Now, while Ghost Ogre Snow Rabbit could be summoned by Hanky Firebacks and could make Hanky Firebacks, Effect Failure can do a whole lot more. So there is a combo which you can do with Christian Hanky Firebacks, Effect Failure, and Celine. So let me tell you that combo right now. You have to make your Hanky Firebacks, and no matter how you make it, doesn't matter. Make it and then summon Effect Failure from your deck. You then have one spell cast on the field, along with a Link 2, so you can use them both to make your Link 3 Celine, Queen of the Master Magicians. Now, Celine's effect is that when she's summoned to the field, she counts the number of spells on both players' fields and both players' graveyards, and gets a spell counter for each of them. Now, as long as she has 3 spell counters from this effect, she can then remove 3 spell counters in order to summon a spellcaster monster from your graveyard to your field to a zone she points to in defense position. And so you can summon back the Effect Failure you just used to make her with your Christian Hanky Firebacks. And so with your Link 1, with your level 1 monster and your Link 3 on the board, you can make a variety of different Link 4s and basically use it as a toolbox card. You can make Appaloosa, Bow of the Goddess, to negate your opponent's monster effects. You can make Topologic Bomber Dragon on the field and then blow up all cards in the main monster zones. You can make Topologic Zeroboros and banish all cards on the field. You can make Unchained Abomination and just destroy cards on crack, as a crazy card that this is. Or you could even take your Effect Failure, turn it into a Link Karibo, and use your 2 monster special summon from the extra deck to make Mech Knight Crusadia Avramax, who is a card which cannot be targeted by your opponent's card effects, and cannot be and forces all your opponent's monsters to attack this card and none of your other monsters. And if this card battles a special summon monster, it will take the attack of that monster and gain attack equal to it. Then, if this card does somehow get sent from the field to the graveyard, you can shuffle 1 card on the field into the deck. So, Effect Failure is not only good because her effect is very versatile and easy to use, but she can be used as a combo piece with Christian Hanky Firebacks to basically be used as a free way to get to your Link 4 monsters. So very, very good card to play in the current format. At number 3, do you smell what the rock is cooking? Because it is Niburu the Primal Being. Niburu the Primal Being is a card which says during the main phase, if your opponent normal or special summon 5 or more monsters this turn, you can tribute as many monsters face up on the field as possible, and if you do, special summon this card from your hand, and then you give them a Primal Being token. Now Niburu is a great way to interrupt your opponent's plays, especially if they are playing combo based strategies. But why Niburu is so relevant and why it's at number 3 on this list is because you have to just consider that the game is in a way where against certain strategies, if you don't stop your opponent from building their board of monsters, you have no chance of playing against them when they go first. It just is the way it is, I'm afraid. And Niburu could give you, say, a lifeline where you actually have a chance to play the game as opposed to no chance whatsoever. And so if your deck is vulnerable or doesn't play other board breaking cards and can lose to these combo based strategies, you definitely want to consider asking yourself, well, do I want a chance to actually be able to play the game at all? And if so, you might want to play Niburu in your deck. So Niburu is a kind of a necessary evil deck. It isn't very synergetic with a lot of strategies. You can't do a whole lot with this card, even though it's a 3000 meter. It's not really an amazing card, but it can give you a chance to play the game, and sometimes that's all you need in order to win. At number 2 on our list, we have Infinite Impermanence. Infinite Impermanence has the ability technically to negate any monster, any spell, or any trap card if you can fulfill its requirements. Infinite Impermanence can be activated directly from your hand if you control no cards, and you can target one face-up monster on the field your opponent controls and negate its effects. Infinite Impermanence also has the ability where if it was set before that it was activated and is on the field at its resolution, you can negate a monster effect, but then also negate a spell or trap card within the same column that it was activated in. This is very important, and anytime you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh!, if your opponent has a face down card, you never want to activate your spells and trap cards in their columns because they might be able to negate it with Infinite Impermanence if you have a monster that can be negated as well. So you've got to be really careful when you play around this card. But because this card is so versatile and it's very, very easy to use, it's a very, very powerful hand trap and should be considered in almost any deck you can play. You will almost always find a use for playing Infinite Impermanence in any deck you're playing in this game. But the number 1 hand trap on this list is definitely Ash Blossom and Joyspring. The fact is that no matter what deck you're playing against, every deck has an engine, and every deck's engine is either going to involve doing one of the following things: adding a card from the deck to the hand, special summoning a card from the deck, or sending a card from the deck to the graveyard. Ash Blossom and Joyspring can negate any of those effects. She is the most versatile hand trap in the game. She is the most commonly used card in the game, period. In the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG Advanced and OCG, she is the most popularly used card, maybe second to Max Z in the OCG, but in the TCG, she's definitely the most popular card in the game. She's easily the best hand trap, and there is never really a reason why you should not be playing her Ash Blossom and Joyspring in your deck. She is just that good to use. The only other time which I say to people maybe don't consider playing Ash Blossom and Joyspring is if you're playing against something like Salamence Greats, and they're going to be playing Heater, which can steal fire monsters from your graveyard. Other than that, Ash Blossom and Joyspring, she's a great card. She's a tuner, she's a level 3, she can play with Needle Firebite and Happy Firebacks, and yeah, she's just a very reliable card. You will almost never have this card dead in your hand. So Ash Blossom and Joyspring is number 1. And so guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video about our list of our best hand traps. There are many different hand traps you should be considering to play in Yu-Gi-Oh! And they provide a very, very unique element to your strategy, something which you can't always access in every single deck. And so I strongly recommend considering these cards whenever you're building your deck, especially playing good old Ash Blossom here. Little favorite card there. Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed seeing the list and seeing something a little bit different for myself. If you enjoyed this video, let me know. I'll make some other lists as well, such as, for example, I want to make a list on the best going second board breaking cards. So I think that would be a good list to make. So if you enjoyed this video, do let me know, and I'll see you soon. Take care.